Good afternoon and welcome to, I said good afternoon, it doesn't have to be afternoon. So whenever you're listening to this, good day and welcome to Wednesday Bible Study. One of the major themes in the text for this Sunday is following Jesus. An invitation from Jesus to come and see, to hear what Jesus or God has to say to us. So this afternoon, today, I would like to talk to you about the Old Testament lesson from 1 Samuel chapter 3. And you've got Samuel, who's a young boy who was kind of apprenticed to a priest named Eli. And Samuel's working with Eli in the temple. And he hears this voice calling to him, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And every time he thinks it is Eli calling to him. This is during the night. They're both asleep. Hears this voice, goes to Eli, says, "Yeah, what do you want?" And Eli says, "It wasn't me. Go back to sleep." Happens 3 times. And finally, Eli comes to the realization that it is God who's talking to Samuel. So he says, listen for God. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, "Go lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.' So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Now the Lord came and stood there, calling as before, 'Samuel, Samuel.' And Samuel said, 'Speak, for your servant is listening.'" So, a question for me arises out of this. Does God still speak to us today? I think the answer is yes. And if so, how does God speak to us today? Reminds me of a story very often, and I share with the confirmation students, and I've shared it with you before, a little clip from the movie History of the World Part 3, or Part 1, or whatever it is, with Mel Brooks. And in this particular scene, Mel Brooks is playing Moses. And so Mel, as Moses, is on top of the mountain, and there's a loud clap of thunder, and a huge voice comes down and says, "Moses, Moses, this is God. Can you hear me, Moses?" And Mel Brooks' Moses responds, hear you, what a deaf man could hear you. "What did you say?" Nothing, forget it. So, you may not hear God speaking to you as this booming voice from above, but I contend that God still does speak to us today. How does God speak to us today? God speaks to us through other people, through circumstances, through epiphanies, through a sermon, through a Bible study, through reading the Bible, through just having honest, truthful discussions with other folks. A lot of ways that you can hear God speaking to you, and even I will contend, as I will share with you in just a moment, even some really difficult to understand, almost possibly mystical ways that God still speaks to us. But an important point to remember through all of this is that God speaks to us as revealed in Jesus Christ. Again, our connection as Christians to God is through Jesus Christ. So that is how we hear God as well. How do we hear God through Jesus? We hear God through Jesus in his life and his death and his resurrection. In his life, he practiced, spoke, preached, lived justice rather than self-interest, forgiveness rather than revenge, acceptance rather than rejection, peace rather than chaos. So if these things you are hearing reflect, and these are just a few examples, if these things that you are hearing reflect justice and forgiveness and peace, and what else did I say? Acceptance. If what you are hearing comes through that filter, then maybe God is talking to you, and you should probably listen. God talks to you through the reality of Jesus' death. And in Jesus' death, he was standing up for what he believed in courage and in faith. So if you stand up for what you believe in courage and in faith, in response to what you hear, then maybe you actually are hearing Jesus. Now, stand up, have the courage rather to stand up for what is right and true and honest, not for what you think may be right, not for what some 24/7 news dude or gal tells you is what is right, but what you know through your understanding of God revealed in Jesus Christ, what you know is right and true and honest and real. Have the courage to stand up for that. And if you do, I think you're hearing God, so listen. And God talks to us through the meaning of Jesus' resurrection, which in essence is hope. So if what you're hearing speaks to hope rather than dismay and despair, then chances are it's God talking to you and you ought to listen. So God talks to us in a lot of ways. I have had experience, I believe, maybe I'm just dreaming, who knows. I've told you the story before. I'm going to tell it to you again. My call story. October of 2002, I'm 51 years old, almost 52, considering changing the course of my entire life and going to 4 years of seminary. I visited Lutheran Seminary in Minneapolis at the urging of my pastor, Pastor Jack. I was heading to his alma mater, Wartburg Seminary in Dubuque, Iowa. So I had visited Luther, got up very early the next morning to drive down to Dubuque, Iowa. Typically in the morning I read the Bible, a chapter of the New Testament and one of the Old Testament, not willy-nilly, arbitrarily, but following through from beginning to end. I didn't do it that morning because I was in a hurry. I wanted it going. I got to Wartburg Seminary, small place, got the tour. Nothing particularly stood out, no epiphanies, no yes, I must do this. So at the end of the day, I'm sitting in a dorm room, a very nice but unadorned dorm room, and pondering my fate. Decide I should probably read the Bible, which I hadn't done that morning. So I did, and I was in the Old Testament in Jeremiah chapter 9. Now, throughout this whole process, some things were bothering me, questions and concerns I had. Number one, if I elected to do this preacher minister thing, I didn't think it was really a very smart thing to do. At my age, taking that kind of change, and where would I end up? It did not seem like the intelligent thing to do. And from a monetary standpoint, there's really no money in the ministry. So, and not that money was that important to me, but I had too often, measured my success in life by how much money I had made. And I knew there was no money in the ministry. So that was another concern or objection that was rolling through my brain. And the other one was that I thought maybe I was just being weak and acquiescing to some momentary impulse, and I wasn't being strong and staying where I was and making it what I was doing back in Big Fork, Montana. And so as a result, I was being weak. So it was not a smart decision. There was no money in it, and maybe I was doing it out of weakness or rather than out of strength. So those were the three concerns or objections I had on my brain really that whole time when I was at Luther and visiting Wartburg and thinking about this whole thing. So with that in mind, I'm sitting there thinking about those three things, sitting in my unadorned dorm room at Wartburg Seminary, reading my chapter of the Old Testament, which is Jeremiah chapter 9, and I got to verse 23. Thus says the Lord, do not let the wise boast in their wisdom, Do not let the mighty boast in their might. Do not let the wealthy boast in their wealth. But let those who boast, boast in this, that they understand and know me. Wow. So I thought, it's God talking to me, addressing the three concerns that I had. And there I was in a place where if I made the decision to attend, I would certainly have an opportunity to have a better chance of understanding and knowing God. So I signed up. In the Old Testament lesson from Samuel, God is speaking to Samuel. And it takes a while for Samuel to eventually listen to God. Same could be true for us. I believe that God speaks to us, and maybe we are not as receptive as we ought to be. But I think God does speak to us in practical ways, maybe even mystical ways, all filtered through Jesus Christ. So if you hear God, if you hear an honest, true, loving, forgiving message of peace and hope and acceptance and forgiveness and courage, if you hear that, then respond as did Samuel. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Thank you for tuning in today. Join us this Sunday for virtual worship. There will be no in-person Sunday school this Sunday, January 17th. We're off this week, but we'll start up again next week. So thank you again. Be well, stay safe, and God bless you all.